Jake Morrison sat in the human section of the Galactic Council chamber and watched the alien delegates argue about trade routes like they always did every week for the past 5 years. The massive hall stretched out before him with its crystal dome showing the stars beyond and the 12 different species each sitting in their own special areas, designed for their weird body types. The Zeltharian delegate was waving his forearms around and making clicking sounds while complaining about human cargo ships being too slow in the outer rim sectors. The Krillian Prime Minister used her long tentacles to tap on her speaking device and said humans were taking too many jobs that should go to more advanced species. The crystalline Vorthak representative just sat there, glowing different colors, which meant they were talking to each other through their mind links and probably making jokes about the mammals again. Lisa Brooks handed Jake a datapad with their final prepared speech and gave him a small nod. She had been his aide for 3 years now and knew exactly what was coming next, even though the aliens had no idea what was about to happen. Jake looked at the speech one more time, but he already knew every word by heart because he had been planning this moment for months ever since the Council rejected humanity's latest proposal to get equal voting rights. The other species always voted together to keep humans in their place as junior members who could only watch and give suggestions that nobody ever listened to. The Ashkari Empire representative stood up on his 6 legs and started talking about how humans needed to accept their role as newcomers to galactic civilization and stop asking for things they had not earned yet. His translator device made his bug like clicking sounds into words that everyone could understand. He said humans had only been in space for a few hundred years, while his people had been flying between stars for over 10,000 years. The other delegates made their species versions of agreeing sounds and gestures. Jake stood up slowly and the chamber did not even notice at first, because humans rarely spoke during these sessions. The Krillian Prime Minister kept talking about mining quotas, while the Hegemony of 6 Suns delegate was reading reports on his multiple screens. Only Lisa and the 2 other humans in their section were paying attention as Jake walked toward the center speaking platform. The chamber's translation system activated when Jake stepped onto the platform and cleared his throat. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," Jake said in a calm voice that carried clearly through the chamber's sound system. A few of the alien representatives looked up from their private conversations, but most kept doing whatever they were doing. The Zeltharian delegate actually rolled his large eyes and made an annoyed clicking sound like he was bothered by being interrupted. Jake continued speaking. "For 5 years, humanity has participated in this council as junior members. We have followed every rule and respected every tradition. We have shared our technology freely and contributed to galactic peace and prosperity. We have asked only for equal treatment and equal voice in the decisions that affect all our peoples." The Vorthak representative's crystal body flashed bright red, which meant annoyance or anger in their color language. The Ashkari delegate started cleaning his antenna with his front legs like he was bored and wanted everyone to know it. The Krillian Prime Minister was still reading reports and not even pretending to listen. "Today, humanity makes its final request to this council," Jake said, and his voice got a little louder. "We ask one last time for equal voting rights and full membership status." He paused and looked around the chamber. A few more aliens were paying attention now, but most still seemed to think this was just another routine human complaint that they could ignore. The Zeltharian delegate actually laughed out loud and said, "The mammals want to play with the grown-ups again, perhaps in another 1,000 years when you have proven you can handle real responsibility." Several other delegates made their species versions of laughing sounds. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out the small metal symbol that represented humanity's membership in the council. The symbol was made from rare earth metals and had taken human artists months to create according to ancient galactic traditions. It was supposed to represent humanity's commitment to galactic civilization and their hope for a peaceful future among the stars. "Very well," Jake said, and his voice was still calm, but something in his tone made Lisa stand up in the human section. "Since this council has made its position clear, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately." He placed the metal symbol on the speaking platform with a soft click that somehow seemed very loud in the sudden quiet of the chamber. A few delegates actually paid attention now. The Hegemony representative looked up from his screens with surprise. The crystalline Vorthak stopped glowing and went completely clear, which meant shock or confusion. But the Zeltharian delegate just waved his arms and said, "Good riddance to the primitives. Now we can get back to important business." Jake turned and walked back toward the human section where Lisa and the other two humans were already gathering their things. The chamber's attention span was very short, and most of the delegates were already going back to their private conversations and reports. The Krillian Prime Minister started talking about trade regulations again like nothing had happened. As Jake reached the exit door, he turned back one last time and looked at the alien delegates who were already moving on to their next agenda item. They had no idea what they had just lost. They thought humans were primitive newcomers who needed their advanced technology and wise guidance to survive in the galaxy. They had never bothered to learn about human history or human achievements. They did not know that humans had developed most of the technology that kept their civilizations running smoothly. Lisa followed Jake out of the chamber and into the corridor where their shuttle was waiting. The two other humans came behind them carrying the few personal items from their section. As they walked toward the shuttle bay, Jake could hear the alien delegates through the chamber doors, still arguing about mining rights and trade routes like this was just another normal day. "Sir?" Lisa said quietly as they boarded the shuttle. "Are you sure about this?" Jake looked back at the council building one last time as their shuttle pulled away. "They made their choice, Lisa. Now they get to live with it." Elena Rodriguez was drinking coffee at her desk in the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Luna when the first emergency signal came through the quantum communication array. The signal was from a Krillian industrial world called Zephyr Prime, where they made most of the manufacturing equipment for their entire sector. The message was short and confused sounding with lots of static and the Krillian words for help and malfunction repeating over and over. Elena had been monitoring galactic communications for 8 years and had never heard panic in a Krillian voice before because their species was famous for staying calm during emergencies. She ran the message through the translation computer and frowned at what she read. The Krillian factories had shut down completely about 6 hours ago, and nobody could figure out why. All their quantum processors had gone dark at exactly the same time and would not respond to any restart commands. The message said their engineers were completely confused because the systems had been working perfectly and showed no signs of problems before they stopped working. Elena checked the timestamp on Jake Morrison's withdrawal announcement and felt her stomach drop. The Krillian systems had failed exactly 4 hours after humanity left the Council. She opened a secure channel to Earth Defense Command and sent the message along with her analysis. Within minutes, her communication board was lighting up with more emergency signals from different alien worlds across the galaxy. Ben Carter was on the bridge of the Earth Defense Ship Venture when Commander Sandra Hayes brought him the first batch of distress calls. The Venture was patrolling the border between human space and the neutral zone, where they often picked up alien communications. Sandra had been his tactical officer for 2 years and knew how to spot patterns in the intelligence data they collected. "Captain," Sandra said as she handed him the data pad, "we are getting reports of system failures from at least 20 different alien worlds. All the failures started within hours of Ambassador Morrison's announcement." She pointed to the timeline she had created, showing when each world reported problems. "Look at this pattern. Every single failure involves technology that uses human-designed components or algorithms." Ben studied the data and whistled softly. The Vorthak Collective's neural link networks were experiencing cascade failures that left their people unable to communicate with each other properly. Their entire civilization was based on shared consciousness through bio-implants that let them think together as one mind. Without those links working right, their government could not function, and their people were getting confused and scared. The Ashkari Empire had lost control of their terraforming systems on 12 colony worlds. The atmospheric processors that kept those planets livable for Ashkari biology were shutting down one by one. The aliens were evacuating their colonies as fast as they could, but their transport ships were having navigation problems too. Sandra showed Ben the technical reports that explained how all these systems used human innovations that the aliens had licensed years ago. "They built their whole civilization on our technology," Ben said as he read through more reports. "And now that we are gone, the technology is shutting itself down." He looked at Sandra, who was already pulling up more data on her screen. How bad is this going to get? Sandra brought up a galactic map that showed human technology distribution across alien space. Almost every major alien system had red markers indicating human tech integration. Sir, this is going to be catastrophic. The aliens never learned how to build this stuff themselves. They just bought licenses from us and plugged our inventions into their existing systems. Patricia Coleman sat in her office at Strategic Command, on Earth, and read through intelligence reports that were coming in faster than her staff could process them. As a general, she had seen plenty of military disasters, but nothing like what was happening in alien space right now. Entire civilizations were grinding to a halt as their technology failed in ways that their own engineers could not understand or fix. The hegemony of Six Suns had lost their faster-than-light communication network, which meant their government could not coordinate between their different star systems. Patricia read a report that said their top scientists were trying to reverse engineer human quantum entanglement communicators, but they did not understand the basic physics principles that made them work. The aliens had been using human inventions for so long that they had never developed the scientific foundation needed to create their own versions. A new report came in from the Zeltharian Empire, and Patricia almost laughed when she read it. The same Zeltharian delegate who had mocked humans at the council was now sending desperate messages to anyone who would listen. His people's war fleet was stranded in space because their navigation systems had failed. The proud Zeltharian military, that always bragged about their superior technology, was now drifting helplessly between stars because they could not calculate jump coordinates without human-designed processors. Marcus Webb walked into Patricia's office carrying a thick folder of technical analysis reports. As head of the Galactic Technology Assessment Division, he had been warning about alien technological dependence for years, but nobody had listened because the licensing deals brought in huge profits for human companies. Now his worst predictions were coming true faster than even he had expected. "General," Marcus said as he sat down across from her desk, "I have been analyzing the failure patterns and the situation is worse than we thought. The aliens did not just license our finished products. They integrated human innovations into the core of their technological infrastructure. When our systems detected the Council withdrawal, they automatically revoked all licensing agreements and activated shutdown protocols." Patricia looked at the technical diagrams that Marcus showed her. Human inventions were everywhere in alien technology, like the foundation of a building. Take away the foundation and everything else collapsed. "How long before they can develop their own replacements?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "That is the problem, General. They never learned the underlying science. Human technological development took centuries of gradual advancement building on previous discoveries. The aliens skipped all those steps and jumped straight to using our final products. They are like people who learned to drive cars, but never learned how engines work. When the car breaks down, they have no idea how to fix it." Victoria Stone read the latest diplomatic messages at her desk in the Earth Embassy building and tried not to feel sorry for the alien species who were begging for help. As ambassador to Galactic Affairs, she had spent years dealing with condescending alien officials who treated humans like primitive children who should be grateful for any attention from their betters. Now those same officials were sending panicked requests for emergency technical assistance. The Krillian Prime Minister, who had dismissed human intelligence just days ago, was now offering massive payments for human technicians to come and restart their industrial systems. The message promised to give humans full voting rights in any future council if they would just send help immediately. Victoria noted that the Prime Minister's tone was very different from the arrogant creature who had lectured humans about knowing their place in galactic civilization. A priority message came through from the Vorthak Collective, but it was strange and disjointed compared to their usual clear communications. The Vorthak normally spoke with one unified voice because their hive mind let them think together perfectly. This message was confused and contradictory, like it had been written by multiple individuals who could not coordinate their thoughts. Victoria realized their neural link system was failing, and their collective consciousness was breaking apart into separate, confused minds. Carol Fisher monitored galactic medical emergency networks from her station at the Interstellar Health Organization. and watched as alien healthcare systems collapsed across multiple worlds. The aliens had used human medical technology for everything from basic diagnostics to complex surgical procedures. Human innovations in biotechnology had revolutionized alien medicine and saved millions of alien lives over the years. Now those same medical systems were shutting down as their human components went dark. The Ashkari Emperor was dying from a genetic condition that could only be treated with human-designed gene therapy. The royal medical staff was sending desperate pleas to Earth, but their messages were being ignored according to the new isolation protocols. Carol watched alien hospitals go dark one by one as their equipment stopped working, and their staff realized they had no idea how to operate the human technology they had been using for decades. The proud galactic empires that had looked down on humanity for centuries were discovering that they had built their civilizations on human foundations. Without those foundations, everything was crashing down faster than anyone had imagined possible. The aliens were learning too late that dismissing your technological partners had consequences they had never considered. Marcus Webb stood in front of the emergency session of Earth's Leadership Council and explained what was happening across the galaxy, while holographic displays showed the spreading disaster in real time. The alien civilizations were not just experiencing technical difficulties anymore. Entire species were facing extinction, as the technology they had depended on for generations continued to fail in ways their best scientists could not fix, or even understand. President Amanda Clark listened as Marcus described how the Krillian Empire's food distribution network had collapsed completely when their logistics AI systems shut down simultaneously across 1,000 worlds. The aliens had used human-designed artificial intelligence to manage everything from crop harvesting to meal delivery in their cities. Without those systems working, their people were starting to starve because nobody remembered how to organize food distribution manually. "The situation is getting worse by the hour," Marcus said as new data appeared on his displays. Krillian refugee ships are fleeing their dying colonies, but their faster-than-light drives are failing mid-journey. We estimate at least 50,000 aliens are stranded in deep space between star systems with no way to call for help because their communication systems are also down. Defense Secretary Ryan Murphy asked how many alien lives were at risk, and Marcus pulled up population statistics that made everyone in the room go quiet. The numbers were staggering. Billions of aliens lived on worlds that could only support life with human-designed terraforming technology. Trillions more depended on human innovations for basic necessities like food production and medical care. Without those systems working, the death toll was going to be massive. Steve Johnson received the emergency deployment order, while his research ship Discovery was studying stellar formation in the outer rim. As captain of one of Earth's most advanced science vessels, he was ordered to observe the Vorthak Collective's homeworld and report on their condition. What he found there shocked him, even though he had read all the intelligence reports about their failing neural networks. The Vorthak had built their entire civilization around their hive mind ability to think and act as one unified consciousness. Their cities were designed for beings who could coordinate perfectly through mental links. Their government made decisions through instant consensus among billions of connected minds. Their technology was operated by multiple individuals working together as seamlessly as parts of a single brain. Now that their human-enhanced neural implants were failing, the Vorthak were becoming individual minds for the first time in their species' history. Steve watched through his ship's telescopes as their perfectly organized cities descended into chaos. Vorthak individuals who had never made independent decisions in their lives were wandering around confused and scared. Their transportation systems had stopped working because they required coordinated mental input from multiple operators who could no longer connect to each other properly. The most heartbreaking thing Steve observed was Vorthak individuals trying desperately to reconnect with their collective consciousness. They would stand in groups pressing their crystal hands together and focusing intensely, but nothing happened. The bio-neural implants that had given their species its greatest strength were now causing them terrible pain as the human designed safeguards activated to prevent brain damage from the failing connections. Carol Fisher coordinated the medical monitoring effort from Earth and compiled reports that painted a horrifying picture of galactic healthcare collapse. The Zeltharian emperor, who had laughed at human requests for respect, was now dying slowly as his species' advanced medical systems failed one by one. The royal physicians, who had always claimed Zeltharian medicine was superior to primitive human healing methods, were now helplessly watching their patient deteriorate. The emperor's condition required constant treatment with human-designed gene therapy that corrected genetic flaws in the Zeltharian royal bloodline. Without that treatment, the accumulated genetic damage from centuries of selective breeding was causing his body to break down at the cellular level. The Zeltharian medical staff was sending hourly updates, begging Earth to send just one human doctor who could operate their gene therapy equipment. But Earth's new isolation policy meant no help was coming. Similar medical emergencies were happening across the galaxy as alien healthcare systems that had integrated human biotechnology discoveries found themselves unable to treat conditions they had been managing successfully for decades. The Ashkari Empire lost an entire generation of children when their pediatric life support systems shut down in hospitals across their territory. The Krillian matriarchy watched their population growth rate crash as their fertility treatment centers could no longer help couples reproduce without human-assisted reproductive technology. Greg Thompson commanded Earth's largest military fleet and received hourly intelligence updates about alien military capabilities as their forces fell apart. The proud Ashkari battle fleets that had once threatened human merchant ships were now stranded in their home systems because their weapon targeting systems had gone offline. The advanced energy weapons that made Ashkari ships so dangerous were completely dependent on human-designed targeting algorithms that calculated firing solutions faster than biological brains could process. The hegemony of six suns attempted a desperate attack on the human research station at Kepler 442b, where Dr. Kevin Lewis led a team of quantum engineers. The hegemony military leaders thought they could capture human scientists and force them to restart their failing technology. Their assault fleet jumped into the system with overwhelming numbers, but their attack failed in ways that would have been funny, if not for the lives at stake. The hegemony warships could not coordinate their assault because their fleet communication systems relied on human quantum entanglement networks that were no longer functioning. Individual ship captains tried to fight independently, but their weapon systems kept malfunctioning because they could not properly target human ships that were jamming their sensors. The entire attack fell apart when half the hegemony ships accidentally fired on each other because their identification systems could not tell friend from foe without human-designed recognition software. Kevin Lewis watched the failed assault from his research station's command center and felt sorry for the alien crews who were dying in space because their own technology was turning against them. The human jamming systems were actually trying to prevent the aliens from hurting themselves. But the hegemony commanders interpreted the defensive measures as attacks and kept ordering more desperate assault attempts that only made their situation worse. Julie Foster analyzed intelligence data at Earth's Galactic Intelligence Center and tracked how the alien civilizations were turning on each other as resources became scarce. The collapse of galactic technology was creating shortages of everything from food to fuel, as supply chains that had worked perfectly for centuries suddenly stopped functioning. Ancient alliances between alien species were breaking down as each empire faced extinction and started competing for the remaining stocks of functional equipment. The Krillian Empire launched attacks on Vortex space stations, hoping to capture stockpiles of human-manufactured components that might keep their critical systems running a little longer. The raids were brutal and desperate, with Krillian forces using primitive weapons because their advanced military equipment no longer worked properly. The Vorthak defenders were even worse off because their hive mind coordination was gone, and they could not organize effective resistance against the attacks. Claire Adams chaired emergency sessions in Earth's Senate, where legislators debated how to respond to the galactic crisis. Some senators wanted to send humanitarian aid to prevent the complete extinction of alien civilizations. Others argued that the aliens had brought this disaster on themselves by dismissing human contributions and treating Earth as a junior partner. For so many years, the debates were passionate and sometimes angry as senators read reports of alien children dying in failed hospitals and entire species facing extinction. But the majority supported President Clark's isolation policy. They remembered decades of condescension from alien officials who had claimed humans were too primitive to deserve equal treatment in galactic affairs. The same aliens who had mocked human achievements were now paying the price for never learning to develop their own technological capabilities. Jack Parker gave military briefings that showed human forces were completely safe from the chaos spreading through alien space. Human technology was purely human-developed and therefore immune to the shutdown protocols that were crippling alien systems. Earth's defensive capabilities were actually stronger than ever, because the alien military threats that had worried human strategists for years were now eliminated by the aliens' own technological dependence. The galaxy that had once seemed so advanced and sophisticated was revealing itself to be a house of cards built on human foundations. When those foundations were removed, everything else came crashing down faster than anyone had imagined possible. Greg Thompson stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship and watched the communication screens light up with desperate messages from alien leaders who 6 months ago would not have bothered to respond to human diplomatic requests. The proud beings, who had once dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers, were now begging for forgiveness and offering everything they owned in exchange for technological assistance to stop their civilizations from completely collapsing. Emperor Zakthul of the Ashkari Empire sent a personal transmission that would have been unthinkable before the withdrawal. The arrogant ruler who had lectured humans about knowing their place in the galactic order was now speaking in a broken voice about his dying people. His empire had lost 40% of its population in the past 3 months as their life support systems continued to fail and their medical technology remained offline. Great humans, the emperor said in his message, using a title that Ashkari had never applied to any other species. We beg for your mercy and wisdom. Our people are dying because we were blind to your greatness. We offer complete surrender and eternal servitude if you will only send help to save our children. The transmission included offers of tribute that represented the entire wealth of the Ashkari Empire, including their most sacred artifacts and their royal treasury. Similar messages arrived hourly from other alien leaders as their situations grew more desperate. The Krillian Prime Minister, who had dismissed human intelligence, now offered to make humanity the ruling species of her empire. The hegemony of 6 suns promised to serve as human vassals for 1,000 years. Even the Vorthak Collective managed to send a confused but heartfelt plea through their fragmenting communication networks. Julie Foster received intelligence reports showing that several alien empires were attempting to forcibly seize human assets as their diplomatic requests continued to be ignored. The desperation was making some alien leaders consider military solutions even though their forces were barely functional. The hegemony of 6 suns was planning another assault on human research facilities, hoping to capture scientists and engineers who could restart their failing systems. The hegemony attack fleet assembled near the human research outpost at Kepler 442b, where Dr. Kevin Lewis continued his quantum engineering work under heavy guard. The alien commanders knew their ships were operating at less than 30% capacity, but they were running out of time as their home worlds continued to lose life support. The assault was scheduled for dawn, when they hoped to catch the humans off guard. Kevin Lewis monitored the approaching enemy fleet from his laboratory's command center and felt sadness rather than fear. The hegemony warships were struggling just to maintain formation as their navigation systems glitched and failed. Their weapons were unreliable, and their shields kept fluctuating because all these systems depended on human innovations that were no longer supported. The aliens were essentially flying death traps held together by failing technology they did not understand. The battle began at sunrise, with the hegemony fleet attempting a coordinated assault that immediately fell apart when their ships could not communicate with each other effectively. Individual captains made their own attack runs, but their targeting computers could not lock onto human vessels that were jamming their sensors with relatively simple countermeasures. The human defensive systems were actually designed to disable alien weapons safely, rather than destroy the attacking ships. But the hegemony commanders interpreted this mercy as a new form of weapon. 3 hegemony cruisers collided with each other. When their proximity sensors failed during the attack approach, 2 more ships suffered critical system failures that left them drifting helplessly in space with their life support running on emergency power. The remaining vessels retreated in confusion as their crews realized they were fighting with equipment they could barely operate against opponents who understood technology far better than they did. Kevin watched the failed assault and authorized rescue operations for the disabled hegemony vessels. Human ships moved in to provide emergency life support and medical assistance to alien crews who were dying as their own technology turned against them. The grateful hegemony survivors could not understand why the humans they had tried to attack were now saving their lives. Commander Sandra Hayes coordinated similar rescue operations across human space as desperate alien raids continued to fail in predictable ways. The aliens were attempting to capture human facilities with forces that could barely function, while the humans they were attacking possessed fully operational technology and complete understanding of how their systems worked. It was like watching children with broken toys trying to fight adults with working equipment. The most tragic incident occurred when a Krillian strike force attempted to seize the human medical research station at Wolf 359. The Krillian ships were carrying thousands of their people who were dying from diseases that had been easily treatable when their medical systems worked properly. The aliens hoped to force human doctors to treat their sick, but their assault fleet suffered multiple system failures during the approach, and 3 ships lost life support completely. Human rescue teams saved most of the Krillian civilians, but could not prevent hundreds of deaths as the alien medical equipment aboard their ships continued to malfunction. The surviving Krillians begged the human rescuers to help treat their people, but Earth's isolation protocols prevented any medical assistance. The aliens were forced to watch their loved ones die from conditions that human medicine could have cured easily. Patricia Coleman analyzed intelligence reports that showed the alien civilizations were beginning to fight each other more frequently as competition for resources intensified. The collapse of galactic technology had disrupted trade, networks and supply chains that had operated smoothly for centuries. Species that had been allies were now enemies competing for the few remaining stockpiles of functional equipment. The Vorthak collective's fragmented consciousness made them especially vulnerable to attacks from other species. Individual Vorthak could not coordinate defense efforts effectively, and their once impregnable collective territories were being invaded by desperate Ashkari and Krillian forces, seeking any technology that still worked. The crystal beings who had once been among the galaxy's most advanced people were now helpless refugees fleeing their own worlds. Ancient territorial disputes that had been settled peacefully through council mediation were now erupting into violent conflicts. The Zeltharian Empire attacked former allies over mining rights to asteroids that contained rare metals needed for technology repair. The wars were fought with increasingly primitive weapons as advanced military systems continued to fail across all species. Millions died in battles that accomplished nothing because the combatants lacked the knowledge to fix their problems even if they won. Claire Adams received daily reports about the escalating violence and the growing death toll as galactic civilization continued its collapse. Some Earth senators pushed for humanitarian intervention, arguing that humanity had a moral obligation to prevent genocide, even if the aliens had brought this disaster on themselves. The debates were emotional, with legislators struggling to balance compassion against the memory of decades of alien contempt for human achievements. The majority of Earth's government remained committed to isolation, but the pressure was growing as images of dying alien children reached human media networks. Public opinion polls showed that most humans supported helping alien civilians while refusing to assist the governments that had dismissed humanity for so long. The distinction between innocent alien people and their arrogant leaders was becoming an important factor in policy discussions. President Clark addressed the United Nations and reaffirmed Earth's position that humanity would remain isolated until the alien species demonstrated genuine respect for human contributions to galactic civilization. She acknowledged the suffering in alien space but pointed out that humanity had offered partnership and cooperation for years, only to be rejected and insulted. The aliens had chosen to build their civilizations on borrowed technology without learning the underlying science, and now they were paying the consequences. Military advisors briefed Earth's leadership about the continued degradation of alien capabilities as more systems failed every day. The great space fleets that had once threatened human interests were now mostly scrap metal drifting between stars. The powerful alien armies were reduced to using weapons that were centuries out of date. The technological gap between humans And aliens was growing wider every day as human science continued to advance, while alien knowledge stagnated. Robert Taylor led reconnaissance missions that surveyed the former alien territories and documented the extent of the collapse. Entire star systems had been abandoned as their life support infrastructure failed. Billions of aliens had died, and trillions more were living in conditions that would have been considered primitive even by medieval standards. The proud galactic empires that had once ruled hundreds of worlds were now struggling to maintain basic civilization on their remaining habitable planets. The galaxy that had seemed so advanced and sophisticated just months ago was now a wasteland of failed technology and dying civilizations. Nina Campbell published her comprehensive analysis of the galactic collapse exactly 1 year after Ambassador Morrison walked out of the council chamber, and nobody could argue with her conclusions anymore. The proud alien empires that had once controlled hundreds of star systems and ruled over trillions of beings were now reduced to primitive settlements. On a handful of worlds where basic survival was a daily struggle, the death toll had reached numbers so large that human statisticians had trouble calculating the exact figures. Entire species had gone extinct as their homeworlds became uninhabitable without human-designed life support systems. The hegemony of 6 suns lost 5 of their 6 star systems when their terraforming equipment failed, and their atmospheric processors shut down permanently. The survivors were crowded onto their original homeworld, living in conditions that their ancestors would have recognized from thousands of years ago before they developed space travel. The Vorthak Collective no longer existed as a unified civilization because their hive mind network had collapsed completely and could not be repaired without human neural interface technology. Individual Vorthak wandered the ruins of their crystal cities like lost children, trying to remember how to think independently after millennia of shared consciousness. Most of them died from psychological trauma, as their minds could not cope with the isolation of individual thought. President Clark stood before Earth's assembled leadership and announced humanity's new policy toward the surviving alien populations. The isolation period was officially over, but the galaxy that humans were emerging into was completely different from the one they had left. Instead of dealing with proud empires that treated Earth as a junior partner, humanity would now be managing the remnants of collapsed civilizations that had no choice but to accept human authority. We will consider applications for protectorate, status from surviving alien groups, President Clark announced to the assembled diplomats and military leaders. The terms are simple and non-negotiable. Complete acceptance of human technological oversight in exchange for survival assistance. Former empires that wish protection must surrender all claims to independence and accept Earth's guidance in rebuilding their societies. The conditions were harsh but fair considering what had happened. Alien groups that wanted human help would have to prove they understood their dependence on human innovation and were willing to learn rather than simply use human technology without comprehension. Educational programs would be mandatory to ensure that future generations of aliens understood the science behind the tools they used, rather than treating human inventions like magic. Robert Taylor commanded the first human expedition to return to the former Galactic Council chamber, which had become a dark tomb orbiting a dead world. The massive space station where alien delegates had once dismissed human proposals was now a monument to the consequences of technological arrogance. The aliens had never managed to restart even basic life support after the human maintenance system shut down. Captain Michelle Green led the archaeological team that entered the council chamber, for the first time since Jake Morrison placed humanity's membership symbol on the speaking platform and walked out. The chamber looked exactly the same as it had during that final session, but the silence was deafening. The alien delegates who had laughed at human requests for respect were now frozen corpses in their ceremonial seats, where they had died when the station's life support failed. The Zeltharian delegate who had made jokes about primitive mammals was still sitting in his assigned location with his forearms positioned, as if he had been reaching for his communication device when the air recycling system stopped working. The Krillian Prime Minister's tentacles were wrapped around her speaking platform, like she had been trying to call for help when the power went out. The crystalline Vorthak representative had turned completely black, which meant death in their color language. Michelle's team recovered Jake Morrison's membership symbol from the speaking platform where he had left it as humanity's final statement to the Council. The small metal artifact had become one of the most significant objects in galactic history, representing the moment when the galaxy learned that dismissing technological partners had consequences that went far beyond hurt feelings or damaged relationships. Peter Hall established the Department of Galactic Administration in Geneva and began processing requests from the handful of surviving alien enclaves that wanted Earth's protection. The applications were heartbreaking documents that showed how completely the former empires had fallen from their previous positions of power and influence. Species that had once ruled hundreds of worlds were now begging for permission to settle on single planets under human supervision. The Zeltharian Empire's application was submitted by a minor noble named Zektar, who was the highest-ranking survivor of their royal family. The document offered humanity complete ownership of all former Zeltharian territories in exchange for basic life support technology to keep their remaining population alive. The proud species that had once bragged about their superior military forces was now reduced to fewer than 10 million individuals living in refugee camps on agricultural worlds. Similar applications arrived daily from other species as word spread that Earth was willing to help aliens who accepted human authority. The Ashkari Empire offered their entire cultural heritage, including their most sacred religious artifacts, if humans would provide food synthesizers and medical equipment to their surviving colonies. The Krillian matriarchy promised to serve humanity faithfully for 1,000 generations in exchange for technology that would let them maintain breathable atmospheres on their remaining worlds. The most tragic application came from a group of individual Vorthak who had somehow managed to maintain enough mental coherence to communicate with Earth. They offered to serve as experimental subjects for human consciousness research if scientists would help them develop new ways to connect with each other. The former members of the galaxy's most advanced collective intelligence were now willing to let humans experiment on their brains in hopes of regaining some form of shared thought. Amanda Clark toured the first human protectorate facilities where former alien empire citizens were learning to live under Earth's guidance. The aliens were housed in simple but comfortable accommodations while human teachers worked to educate them about basic scientific principles they would need to understand before being trusted with advanced technology again. The lessons started with fundamental concepts that human children learned in elementary school. The educational programs were necessary because the investigation of alien technological dependence had revealed the shocking extent of their scientific ignorance. Species that had used human faster-than-light drives for decades could not explain how the engines worked or what physical principles made interstellar travel possible. Aliens who had operated human medical equipment for years did not understand basic biology or chemistry concepts that were prerequisites for advanced healthcare. Human teachers reported that many aliens struggled with scientific thinking because their cultures had become accustomed to treating technology as something mysterious that worked without needing to be understood. Generations of aliens had grown up believing that advanced devices were naturally occurring phenomena rather than engineered solutions based on scientific knowledge and mathematical principles. The education process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but some aliens showed genuine enthusiasm for learning about the science behind human innovations. Young Ashkari and Krillian students displayed curiosity about physics and engineering that gave human educators hope for future cooperation between species. The children who grew up in the protectorate programs might eventually become true partners in technological development, rather than just users of human inventions. Jake Morrison published his memoirs 5 years after walking out of the council chamber, and his book became required reading in human schools and alien education programs. The simple title, What We Lost When We Left, described both the collapse of galactic civilization and humanity's emergence as the galaxy's dominant technological power. The final chapter contained the observation that would be remembered for centuries. They never understood that they had not uplifted us. Jake wrote about the alien civilizations that had treated humanity as primitive newcomers to galactic society. We had uplifted them by sharing our innovations and scientific knowledge freely. When we withdrew our support, they fell back into the darkness from which we had rescued them without ever realizing they needed rescuing. The galaxy that emerged from the collapse was fundamentally different from the old order where multiple species claimed equality in technological advancement. Earth now stood unchallenged as the center of galactic civilization. with other species serving as junior partners who understood their dependence on human knowledge and innovation. The arrogant empires that had dismissed human achievements were gone forever, replaced by humble communities that were grateful for human guidance. Human children growing up in this new galaxy would inherit a universe where their species was recognized as the galaxy's technological and scientific leaders.